Good Friday evening to you. Welcome to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon. We have a jam-packed show. We're going to talk some Cavs as Kevin Porter Jr. has been traded, and the Cavs are playing pretty well. They're getting ready to battle the Brooklyn Nets again. We will also, of course, talk about the Cleveland Browns. We're hoping we'd be talking about the AFC Conference Championship game, but the Browns season ended with that loss in the divisional round to the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, the awards are pouring in, and Kevin Stefanski named the Coach of the Year in the NFL, and a very well-deserved honor, the first Browns coach to be named Coach of the Year in the NFL since back in 1986 when Marty Schottenheimer was named the NFL's Coach of the Year. Let's bring in Ellis Williams, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the page of the Plain Dealer. And Ellis, I can't say it's a surprise. I expected it, but I'm glad it happened. I think nobody deserved to be Coach of the Year more than Kevin Stefanski.
It's a surprise depending on when you realize it was going to happen. You know, if we would have said this was going to be the case in August, it's definitely a surprise. But I completely agree. No one was more deserving than Kevin Stefanski. You know, the list became short right after the Steelers loss, I'd say, and when they started to fall apart. You know, Mike Tomlin, of course, starting 11-0 would have been a favorite there. You think of Sean McDermott in Buffalo, but they've sort of been around in a playoff contender and have now taken that leap, rather than coming out of nowhere. Usually it's the coach that turns around an organization from last to first or somewhere in between, like the Browns were. Matt LaFleur in Green Bay comes to mind. They've had a impressive couple of seasons here, and of course being the number one seed in the NFC. But all in all, considering everything Kevin Stefanski had to face being a first-year coach in the midst of a pandemic, the most unprecedented season in football, and everything in between, this wild roller coaster of a ride that was the 2020 Browns season, he was never fazed, and he took every blow, and this team took every blow, and they really became a product of their head coach. They're about their business, they're organized, and they don't flinch. And look, the Chiefs game I don't think it was Kevin Stefanski's finest moment, but you're going up against the world champions and future Hall of Fame coach in Andy Reid. But as a complete body of work, no one more deserving than Kevin Stefanski for Coach of the Year in 2020.
Yeah, had the best record for a first-year head coach, the only first-year head coach to win a first-round playoff game, although he wasn't the coach, but his team still won. So there were plenty of style points there as well. And if you think about all of the obstacles that you have to overcome as first-year head coach, and to do it when there's a pandemic and everything is done virtually, that really is an impressive season that Kevin Stefanski put together.
And it just speaks to the man that he is. The Browns were really prepared for this pandemic because of the two leaders they put in place in Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, two younger guys, two tech-savvy guys, of course, Ivy League, extremely intelligent men, and that set them up to be able to handle this storm. There's football minds that would not have been able to land this plane the way Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry did. And again, it's going to take some time to truly know everything they endured this year for the whole league. You know, there's going to be, I'm sure there will be case studies on this league and this league year in general because of just everything all 32 teams had to face. And the Browns were right up there with some of the toughest hands they were dealt week in and week out. And again, like you said, finished with an 11-5 record, first playoff win since 1994. We could go on and on about the historic marks that this team reached, and that's why he's sitting with the Coach of the Year award.
What do you think the biggest difference was between the Browns this year and in past seasons? I mean, it was clearly that there was a different vibe almost from the get-go, but what was the biggest difference, and what do you attribute it to?
The biggest difference to me was they had a coordinated plan of attack this season. On offense, defense, and special teams. They knew exactly how they wanted to attack their opponents week in and week out. It was different week to week. It all looked the same because that was Kevin Stefanski's brand of football. Like, okay, yeah, this is play action, or this is Baker and shotgun, run Nick Chubb. But you are who you are. But the way they did it, the variance in which they did it, it was coordinated. You could tell they were working Monday to Saturday on their game plans and executing them. When just looking at last season, it was a lot of let's line up. We have Odell Beckham Jr., we have Jarvis Landry, and we're just going to beat you. And there's plenty of teams in this league that play that style of football, and teams have won championships doing it. But when you're not as gifted and you don't have a Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson that can just fix everything for you, the best way to get the most out of your team is to have an organized plan of attack and execute it. And that's exactly what Kevin Stefanski brought. It goes back to him winning Coach of the Year. That's what's changed. Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, the culture, and being organized and coordinated in your plan of attack.
You do a lot of film study and tape study. I know you've probably looked at the All-22. When you look at that Chiefs game, what jumps out to you? To me, I think there was an opportunity that the players are probably saying, man, we had a chance, we just let it get away. What is the All-22 and what you've looked at, what does it say to you?
Yeah, the Chiefs went 2 of 5 in the red zone, missed an extra point, missed a field goal, and Patrick Mahomes didn't play the final 29 minutes, and the Browns still lost. And I think it's completely acceptable, and matter of fact, it's accurate to say that the Browns both missed an opportunity last Sunday and had an extremely successful season. Both are true. When I look at the All-22, and what really just straight up surprised me about Sunday was the Browns' lack of explosive offense. They just did not match the production of their defense, and a lot of that is attributed to Patrick Mahomes. If Patrick Mahomes doesn't leave that game, the Chiefs are probably en route to 550 total yards of offense and scoring 40 points. But they didn't do that. That's not what happened. So you can't say Patrick would have done that because we just don't know. The reality is he left the game, the Chiefs scored 22 points, and the Browns couldn't generate an explosive play when they needed it. And from watching the All-22 specifically, you really got to credit the Chiefs defense. Simply put, they had the Browns figured out. They knew where the play action shots were coming. They weren't scared of any of the Browns receivers. They locked up and played physical man coverage, even putting guys like Jarvis Landry in the dirt on some routes sometimes. They just punched the Browns in the mouth with their physicality on the outside and, quite frankly, knew when the deep shots were coming. They had the Browns scouted. They had their tendencies figured out. And that's going to happen. This is Kevin Stefanski's first year as a head coach, his second season calling plays. As this offense grows, we've seen Sean McVay have to do it in Los Angeles, Kyle Shanahan have to do it in San Francisco, and that is going to be the growth and what I'm interested to see as we go into next season and into training camp. As far away as that sounds, there's going to have to be some expansion of the offense, different ways to generate explosive plays rather than just bootleg and shotgun throws. And I don't know where that's going to come from. I would like to see Kevin Stefanski explore the seams more often with a tight end. David Njoku had a nice grab on Sunday on a seam route that the Browns just really don't throw often. They don't even run it, quite frankly. So I was surprised that the Browns offense didn't generate more points. It's really that simple. There wasn't a trick play in hand. I didn't think they ran the ball enough in the second half with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Nick Chubb averaging 10 yards a carry in the fourth quarter. Things just got away from him, and that happens. It's the biggest game of Kevin Stefanski's career, the biggest game in recent Browns franchise history, and you're facing the defending champs and Andy Reid. It's okay to say they missed an opportunity and still had a great season, because that's exactly what happened.
Let me ask you this, and I've asked this of a couple people, interested in your opinion. If they have Odell Beckham and you can put him outside to kind of threaten the defense, does that pull some people out and create, some other opportunities? I'm not one that subscribes to this, the offense is better without Odell. I think Baker and Odell got to find out the chemistry, but I think they need somebody that threatens the defense in space, and Odell does that.
Dave, we're headed for an offseason of get rid of Odell Beckham Jr. because Donovan Peoples-Jones has shown us enough. And as good as DPJ played, and he showed plenty of promise, and he's probably going to be a Brown for quite a bit here, he's not Odell Beckham Jr. You can't replace a guy like Odell with a youngster. It just doesn't work. You're not going to find one in the draft, and there's not one on this roster other than Odell Beckham Jr. The only way you replace a star with a star is when you get lucky and do your due diligence in the draft. But what the Minnesota Vikings did with trading Stephon Diggs and replacing with Justin Jefferson. Stephon Diggs finished first in receiving this year, receiving yards. Justin Jefferson finished third. That doesn't happen in this league often. Odell Beckham Jr. would have made a difference on Sunday with just being his explosive self on the field, the ability to stretch defenses, get some of that press coverage, and start scaring the Chiefs out of that, and then they can play more zone. And we've seen what Baker Mayfield does to zone defenses. But without his just simply game-breaking speed, the Chiefs weren't worried. They weren't worried about Rashard Higgins going deep. They weren't worried about Jarvis Landry, and for good reason. Those are great receivers. They're really talented at their craft, but they just aren't going to take a reverse 50 yards and win a game for you like Odell did in Dallas. And the Browns desperately needed just a playmaker on Sunday versus the Kansas City Chiefs, because Kansas City had plenty of them. We all saw that.
When you look at this season, from beginning to end, who do you see, and I don't need necessarily one guy, who do you see as somebody that really stepped and took a huge leap forward? And it doesn't have to be one, but guys that, you think, boy, we found out we got something there.
Yeah, I call it leveling up, and it's one of the most unpredictable things in sports. But when it happens, it's a beautiful sight. It's usually the maturation and combination of great coaching and then athletic talent and savviness. Of course, you have to be sharp out there on the football field. To me, it's Wyatt Teller. We came into this season not knowing who was going to play right guard, thinking it might have been a rookie, undersized center in Nick Harris, and all of a sudden, well, what do you know? It's this big, bruising guard named Wyatt Teller, who has catapulted himself to probably the second best guard in football. He'll probably be paid handsomely for it this offseason. He needs to improve a bit in his pass blocking. It was actually a missed assignment on him. Not even a missed assignment. He just got beat by an all-pro on the Browns' last offensive play when Baker Mayfield was forced to check it down to Kareem Hunt, and they punted it away. He had some bad just misses in towards the second half of the season, but in general, he's a bruising run blocker. I'm confident his pass sets will get better, and that jump to me was just completely unforeseen, and it solidified the Browns' offensive line as the best in football. I think, of course, you have to mention Baker Mayfield. We went from not knowing if Baker was going to be in this league for a long time to that after that first Steelers game and the Cincinnati interception, thinking, all right, the Browns are going to draft a quarterback, to now realizing Baker Mayfield's going to be here for a while. He has grabbed that position, and more than just playing well and playing really sharp in the red zone specifically, he's the leader of this football team. And that is something you can't quantify on the field. I think it gets tricky when you're a front office and you lean so hard into analytics. And I think Andrew Berry is going to be having these trying debates with himself in his head about, okay, what is Baker truly worth? Because sometimes leadership can be overvalued on a football field, but it's not overvalued in the locker room. This is Baker's team. And that was, again, solidified this season. And then on a tier 3 type of guy, I think we got to show Terrence Mitchell some love here. Terrence Mitchell is a guy who played the most snaps for the Browns this year on defense, over 1,000 reps, stayed healthy, and was just reliable. I can't think of a Terrence Mitchell play where he truly just got. Maybe one Chase Claypool recent play comes to mind, but he was just reliable over there, a guy who was sort of an afterthought with the hype that Denzel Ward and Greedy Williams get being 1-2. And Terrence stepped up and was just completely reliable and solid all season. So from a tier level, it's Wyatt Teller, Baker Mayfield, and I think Terrence Mitchell deserves a mention.
Last thing I'll go before we go to break, the offensive line, you mentioned it. How good can this offensive line be? Keep in mind, again, this was a first year with a lot of these guys together, and so much of offensive line play is getting to know the guy next to you. And even this year, they were subbing in, and this guy was hurt, and this guy was hurt. They were out, and they didn't play as a unit that long. How good do you think this line can be if they can get together and play 10, 12, 14 games together?
I hate to be cliche, but sky's the limit. Cleveland fans have walked into a Dallas Cowboy-like offensive line from, when was that? Probably 8 years ago. From center to right tackle across the board, you're stacked. You're just stacked. And the stats back it up. The tape backs it up, whether you're looking at PFF grades or ESPN's win rate. The Browns have all 5 positions inside the top 5. The only player not in the top 10 of ESPN's win rate in both run and pass blocking is Jedrick Wills, left tackle. He is in the top 10 for run blocking for win rate, but not for pass blocking. And he's only going to get better. So if you had to pick a weak spot in the line, you're going to tell me it's Jedrick Wills, your 10th overall rookie, who's in position to become one of the best left tackles in football. You're stacked. Things don't last forever in this league. They change extremely quickly. Just look at Carson Wentz right now, or Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff. Things don't last forever, but when it comes to the foundation of this team, the offensive line's here to stay, and it's the greatest advantage that the Browns have had all season.
Ellis Williams, we'll also note, Jedrick Wills switched from right tackle in college to left tackle here and did it pretty well. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of break, Ellis and I will talk about upgrades. What do the Browns look to do? What do we need to do in the offseason if we're Andrew Berry to make this team go a little bit further than the first, second round of the playoffs? More Sports, Les Levine. Weekend Winners Edition will be right back. Stay with us.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
Do you like Ohio State football? Would you like to get information from me, Doug Lesmerises, about Ohio State football without having to look at my face? We have got the plan for you. Become an Ohio State text subscriber through cleveland.com. You send a text, 614-350-3315. What do you get? 2, 3, 4 texts right in your phone every day about Ohio State football. Inside information, polls, voting, all kinds of things. You can be on our podcast. We take text subscriber questions on our Buckeye Talk podcast every week. If you really want to be involved with Ohio State football, in season or out of season, become an Ohio State text subscriber from cleveland.com. Send a text to 614-350-3315. 14-day free trial. What do you have to lose? $3.99 a month after that. 614-350-3315. I'll see you in your phone.
Tri-C is here for you. Now more than ever, you need a post-secondary education. So I encourage you to start your journey here at Tri-C. The majority of fall classes will take place online, but we've added a variety of formats to meet your learning needs, and we've taken many steps to keep you safe on campus. Whether you're ready to get started or your four-year plans have changed, Tri-C is where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. More Sports and Les Levine. Weekend Winners Edition continues. Dave Bacon, and we are going to continue talking Browns football. Let's bring in Ellis Williams, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. So, Ellis, by all accounts, great season. I mean, it's not overstated to say that. A lot of people expected the Browns to be 500. They had a playoff win, made it to the divisional round, 5 points away from going to the conference championship. But where do you look to upgrade? What was a glaring need there? There are areas that you look at and you go, not quite there yet. What are the elements that the Browns need to add to this squad to be among the elite?
To me, it's speed, and the Chiefs exposed it. They looked slow both on offense and defense on Sunday, and those were issues that were sort of showing themselves in matchups like the Ravens. You know, I don't think the Browns have any sort of game plan or ability to contain Lamar Jackson. And when it comes to winning football games and chasing championships, it starts with forming a roster that wins your division. They got to find a way to contain Lamar Jackson. And they got to find a way to tackle a running back on a check down on 3rd and 4 and not allow him to get a first down when he runs 4.7 speed. I think Jacob Phillips is the prototype at linebacker that the Browns are going to be looking for as we build towards the offseason and towards the draft. He made some plays this season, some splash plays, and you think of him getting sideline to sideline. That's the type of athletes they're going to need on this team. I think it's important to keep in mind that the Browns dealt with a lot of injuries this season, and really in the offseason because it was training camp when Grant Delpit got hurt. I think he had huge plans for this defense. Joe Woods having huge plans for Grant Delpit. but he wasn't there. And at the end of the day, you need more foot speed on defense if you're going to compete with teams like the Ravens or the Chiefs. And even the Bengals, they've got some talented running backs that are going to have shown ability to take advantage of slower linebackers in space. And the Browns it won't be acceptable if they go into next season not upgrading speed at that position. And then offensively, we talked about missing Odell Beckham, but in general, that position of receiver and I think running back needs to just get faster. I'm not saying taking away anything from Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, or Kareem Hunt, but I think of a guy like JoJo Natson, I think would have had an opportunity to make some plays on Sunday just to run away from tough coverage and take a reverse or just do something fast. They just were a very straight and in-cutting team, in-breaking team. There just wasn't enough explosive plays, and that was evidence on Sunday. They got to find some speed.
And in theory, those aren't guys that usually necessarily go high in the first round either. You can find speed. It's not like you're looking for guys that put pressure on the defense to defend the entire length of the field. And then on the flip side of it, you need guys that can run and tackle in space. That was the biggest thing, and I think we saw that on the 3rd and 14 with Henne. It was like, that guy's not terribly athletic, and they didn't have anybody that could run him down.
It was a disappointing play. To me, I wrote about it all week leading up to the game. I talked about it on the show with you about how important rush lane integrity was going to be on Sunday. And whether it was Patrick Mahomes converting a 3rd and 8 in the first half or the Chad Henne run that essentially sealed the game, even though the 4th and 1 play ultimately did, but you can't let them get to 4th and 1. You had all the momentum. You had a Myles Garrett sack. And then it really goes to what they do need to improve this offseason is finding Myles Garrett another running mate. Because it's not going to be Olivier Vernon coming off that Achilles injury. And Adrian Claiborne played way too many snaps on Sunday, and it was his end side that was exposed when Chad Henne took the edge and made the biggest run of his career. It's because Adrian Claiborne got way too uphill and ignored his contained responsibilities, and the Chiefs exploited it. And to me, that comes down to both speed, but also just being responsible and sharp. So when it comes to the upgrading positions, I think the first spot they're going to look at is D-line, even though we're going to stress linebacker all offseason. I think they're going to look at D-line because we've seen what Joe Woods wants to be. He wants to pressure with 4, create pressure with 4, drop 7. He did it in San Francisco. It was extremely successful because of all the talent they had up front, and now they're going to start laying the blueprint to do that here in Cleveland, I believe.
The other thing is they have – it's not like you have to say, boy, we need this. You have to find guys that have certain skill sets, which, I have more confidence in this front office and this decision-making crew than I have in a long, long time because they did it on the offensive side of the ball last year. Do you expect them to do it on the defensive side of the ball this year?
They haven't let Browns fans down yet. I think of the scene from Wolf of Wall Street when Leo is trying to galvanize his new employees, and he's like, look, does your wife hate you? Good. Pick up the phone. Start dialing. Do you hate your life? Good. Pick up the phone. Start dialing. That's what I could see Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski doing for anyone that calls them about their offensive line issues. Hey, is your quarterback getting hurt too much? Good. Pick up the phone. Dial Andrew Berry. Figure out how he fixed this offensive line in one quick offseason, because they went from below average to maybe average, if we're being nice, to the number 1 offensive line in football. And for years to come, PFF graded them the number 1 run offensive line and the number 1 pass offensive line, which has never happened in their history of tracking football plays. It's remarkable. It is just remarkable what they were able to accomplish in one offseason. They didn't miss. There was not a single miss in decision making. And even some of the stuff they didn't do ended up being some of the best stuff they did. Think of the Jadeveon Clowney contract. We talked all offseason about how they need another edge rusher, and they flirted with Jadeveon forever, and he ended up being hurt all the time in Tennessee, didn't generate a sack, made $14 million and nothing to show for it. So even the punches they didn't take were wins. This front office was remarkable in the offseason, which helped propel them through the season, and we have every reason to believe they're going to be great at it again.
Do you expect the defense to be the moving point this year? Because they did a lot of short-term deals. I mean, it's all setting up. Andrew Berry wouldn't come out and say it, but he's not going to. It certainly looks like it was very methodical, and I would expect that from this front office, which is a good thing.
Yeah, there clearly was a hyper focus of fixing the offensive line last offseason, as I just detailed. And now it seems logical that they're going to pour their resources into the defense. Get better up front. Larry Ogunjobi seems like a guy who probably isn't going to return here. It was a disappointing season for him. They're going to need more from Jordan Elliott next season, their rookie, but they're also going to keep looking for guys like that. I already detailed how they need an edge rusher, a defensive end. And these things are going to be able to arrive in Cleveland because last offseason they didn't ignore it, but like you said, 1-year deals, planning to build into 2021 after taking care of the offense. They did that. They got Kevin Stefanski everything that he needed, a great offensive line, a bunch of tight ends, and now it's time to address the defense and help Joe Woods out.
The other thing, Andrew Berry was asked specifically, do you need to find a way to defend guys like Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and those? And I thought his answer was very interesting. He said, everything in the NFL changes. We can't focus on one guy. We're trying to beat 31 other teams. So I get it. But to your point, you have to identify what it is that you need to improve. And I think the big thing is speed.
Yeah, to me, that's coach speak. They're looking at Lamar Jackson, and the whole defense is frightened. I mean, that guy, what he did Monday night, I still can't get over it. I randomly think about it sometimes. It was a remarkable performance for him to not touch the ball at all in the fourth quarter because of what was going on. And then to come in and on the first play, score, 44-yard, score. I mean, it was basketball-like. Just I got this. And I'm going to be saying it all offseason. As great as this year ended and how it feels like the Steelers are dead, I wouldn't pick the Browns to beat the Ravens right now. They just don't have anyone that can keep up with Lamar Jackson. Myles Garrett is an athlete in his own nature, but it takes 11 and it takes speed. And then we already saw again in the playoffs what a team like the Chiefs do to you when you don't have athletes too. It's an arms race, and the Browns need to catch up on defense now.
The expectations will be ratcheted up without question. The fan base and everybody will expect a lot more. I think this front office understands that and embraces that. Do you get the sense of that? Because we deal with them on a fairly regular basis. I think they see that. And the other thing is, how difficult is it? So you've gone from being so-so to really competitive. Usually going from really competitive to elite is a much tougher jump.
Browns fans, you've arrived. It's here. You are now one of the upper echelon NFL teams that in the offseason are going to get talked about like, hey, could the Browns win the Super Bowl this year? I can't believe I even just said that. But it's where we're at. And you're right. That jump from good to great to excellent to champion is in front of the Browns. I trust someone as due diligent as Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski to guide Cleveland there. This is no guarantee of a championship. A lot of these things just take luck and being in the right place at the right time and having momentum. That's what I thought was so special about this year. There was a lot of just first year magic built into this team, and they were riding that wave. Next year's a new season. I understand the foundation pieces will be there, but no 2 years are alike. It's going to be fascinating to see how Kevin Stefanski expands in his second season and grows. We've already talked about how the defense needs to improve, but you're right. That is what's next. And I think Browns fans, again, have the right guy for that. And it is worth mentioning how quickly things do change. In 2018, Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles, the first Eagles coach to ever win one, and he was fired this year. Not saying that is at all what's going to happen to Andrew Berry or Kevin Stefanski, because there's some stuff about Doug Peterson that I thought, again, was just lightning in a bottle with that Super Bowl run. Nick Foles, I can probably end that point there. But these things change fast, and no 2 years are alike. It is going to be tough sailing, if you will, because you're now dealing with the Lamar Jacksons and Patrick Mahomes of the world. But this is where you want to be. You want your team to be in the fight, and you want guys you trust leading them into that fight, and the Browns have that.
Well, the other thing you heard is Andrew Berry said almost that exact same thing. He said no 2 years are the same, and we realize that. So that is a good sign. That means the front office and the guys making the decisions realize what they did last year, done.
Yeah, and there's no entitlement. And the players don't seem to have it. There was something about the team last year being on Sports Illustrated and GQ and just being the talk of the league that was premature. And simply it went to their head. You start feeling yourself, and then the results don't follow. There is nothing but pride from this team. There's not gloating. They don't feel like they've arrived, and they're going to keep chasing. That's one thing you can get from a guy like Baker Mayfield. It's not about, oh, we're good now, like we did it. They know they're still going to work and work and work to get this right. Sure, take the offseason, go on vacation, but they're going to get right back in Berea or virtually and get ready to just be better and become better, because that's what all Kevin Stefanski says. And Andrew Barry, we're going to look at every way to improve this roster. We're going to look at every way to get better on offense and every way to get better on defense. It's cliche, it's an oversimplification, and it's overused, but they mean it because that's what they do.
Last thing I'll ask you before I let you go. We had heard from the Haslams throughout the MS&LL this year. What about the fact that they look to have gotten it right, and they look to be kind of the model owners where you hear about them but you don't see them or hear from them, which is what you want from an ownership group?
Yeah, it only took like 8 tries, but you're right, they got it, and that's all you could ask for. Probably 1 year too late with Kevin Stefanski being available last year. I'm sure fans will have a moment this offseason and be like, wow, this could have been year 2 of Kevin Stefanski, but everything happens for a reason. Life is timing, and this has worked out so well for the Haslams. They do deserve praise in finally making the right decision and then just moving behind the scenes. You're right about that. And I don't expect that to change going forward. This seems like a foundation that's laid and in sync with one another. There's no more, jawing and headhunting in Berea or who's on whose side between scouts and analytics guys and front office and coaching staffs. And this guy needs to play over this guy because I drafted him. All that petty stuff that is in so many NFL facilities doesn't seem like it's in Cleveland right now. And because of who they have with Kevin Stefanski, who is just the least ego guy you could get, he's humble, he's confident, and that has bled through the entire organization.
Ellis Williams, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. I'm sure we'll be talking as we move forward throughout the offseason to target some free agents, some draft prospects, and the like. So, Ellis, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Looking forward to it. Get some rest, all right?
All right, sounds good. Ellis Williams, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Cavs beat reporter Chris Fedor will join us. Colin Sexton blowing up in what was one of the most watched games in the NBA this year. We'll talk Cavs, more sports, and less Levine. Weekend Winners Edition will be right back. Stay with us.
A friend of mine brought up Nature Stone.
Our floor was not a nice garage floor. It was cracked and dirty and messy all the time, and it's just pretty. It's a pretty garage floor.
You could tell they really cared about what they were doing. They did an excellent job.
There's a room of lovely people here that have been so nice to us and so great, and such great service from the guys who did the floor, and we just really appreciate that.
And I highly recommend it.
Schedule your free cost estimate today at naturestone.com. It's not just a floor. Wow, it's Naturestone.
There are tastes we remember. Every smell brings the happiness of times gone by. Experience this every time you walk into Gallucci's Italian Foods. Whether you need lunch on the go, a catered party, or that perfect blend of wine, meats, and cheeses, Gallucci's has exactly what you're looking for. Straight from Mama's Kitchen for old world traditions or original experiences. From the tastes you remember to new flavors you'll never forget, Gallucci's is a tasty branch of your family tree.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
More sports and less Levine. The Weekend Winners Edition continues. I'm Dave Bacon. Time to turn our attentions to the Cavs, and there's been plenty of good news with the Cavs. A 7-7 start. It's pretty good. They also have Colin Sexton, who kind of stole the show in a national spotlight game, and they have also now traded Kevin Porter Jr. to the Rockets. When we talk Cavs, we welcome in Cavs beat reporter Chris Fedor here on cleveland.com, as well as the pages of the Plain Dealer. Chris, you knew it was coming. You knew the Cavs' hand was forced with Kevin Porter Jr. What did they get? How do you think they did?
They didn't get anything, Dave. I mean, this was the basic salary dump of a player that had worn out his welcome here in Cleveland. So they got off of his salary for the remainder of this year, and they got off of the $1.78 million for next year, an option that they picked up in his contract last month. And on top of that, they got an open roster spot. So from that standpoint, Dave, it was better than just waiving him outright, where they would have been committed to his salary that would have stayed on their books. It would have limited their financial flexibility, and it would have pushed them a lot closer to the luxury tax. So now they have a little bit of wiggle room here to play with if they want to fill that final roster spot with a backup point guard that has been a need for this team for the last couple of weeks, considering Matthew Dellavedova's return is questionable at best at this point in time. There is no specific timeline for him to come back. So if the Cavs want to go that direction, they can certainly do that, or they can keep that open roster spot and see if something bigger pops up.
Do you think this kind of paves the way for a second, maybe bigger trade? And you've seen some reports nationally that that Dan Gilbert has said you can take on some salary to potentially go for the playoffs. You know, with a 7-7 record and a team that's playing well with young guys, it's fine. You should start thinking, hey, we might be able to get 6th, 7th, 8th spot in the Eastern Conference.
Well, it's interesting because I was looking at some numbers from last year. And at this point, Dave, 1 month into the season last year, 13 of the 16 teams that were in the playoff picture went on to make the playoffs. So that means only 3 missed. So the odds, obviously, even though it's so early in this really weird season for the Cavs, the odds are favorable for them to do that. And as the Cavs were beating Brooklyn the other night, I got a text from a Western Conference personnel man that said the Cavs are getting the 8th seed. They play harder than anybody in the Eastern Conference, and they defend their butts off. And that's going to go a long way. There are certain teams that aren't going to want to deal with them for 48 minutes because they're feisty, because they continue to fight, because they're really, really physical. So there is a belief that the Cavs can continue this style of play, Dave, around the NBA, and maybe do have an opportunity to sneak into one of those final playoff spots. In saying that, yes, I think Dan Gilbert has always been willing to spend. I think the Cavs will be really judicious when it comes to that, though, because all indications are they want to avoid the luxury tax if possible. They're about $3.6 million away from the luxury tax at this point in time. And if they're going to go into that, it has to be for a relatively significant piece. They're not just going to go into that for somebody who's not going to make a significant difference for this roster, both in the short term and the long term. So yes, they're willing to spend. Yes, they're willing to make moves ahead of the trade deadline, but there's always a qualifier attached to that, right? It always has to make sense for both Dan Gilbert, the Cavs organization in the short and long term, and for general manager Kobe Altman. But because they have this extra roster spot, Dave, and we talked about this the other day, it is hard to trade somebody like Andre Drummond because he has such a high salary number. It's $28 million. And there aren't a lot of ways for teams to get to that number. And salaries have to match in the NBA when you pull off these kinds of trades. Well, now suddenly, because the Cavs have an open roster spot, they can do a 3-for-1 type trade for Drummond, or they could do a 4-for-2 type trade for Drummond. And that gives them, I think, more options in terms of potential trade partners in a deal for Andre Drummond. Or if they want to go the route of trading JaVale McGee, they could certainly do that. They could explore another deal for Kevin Love the way that they've been exploring those deals since basically the time that he got here and since he signed that big extension. So an extra roster spot means optionality, and I do think it makes it easier for the Cavs to take back more players in a potential Andre Drummond or Kevin Love trade in a way that they probably couldn't before the agreed to deal for Kevin Porter Jr.
Okay, we've talked about that. Let's get to something that's a lot of fun. So the Nets game against the Cavs earlier in the week. Now there's one coming up tonight. One of the most, or actually the most watched game in the NBA on League Pass this year. So you have Irvin, Harding, and Durant playing together for the first time. And Colin Sexton, the young guy, goes and steals the show and drops 42 on him, wins the game in double overtime. That's a significant step up in the national spotlight for the young point guard of the Cavs, or might be an off guard, but the young guard of the Cavs.
Well, he is an off guard. I think the Cavs admitted last year in the draft when they took Darius Garland with the 5th overall pick that Colin Sexton wasn't a point guard, and that's fine. He doesn't have to be. He's a scorer. That's his core. That's what he's always tried to do, and he's great at it. So why try and make him something that he's not? You know what I mean? He's not Trae Young. He's not Luka Doncic. He doesn't have to be. What he's doing at the level that he's doing it, very few guys in the NBA are. And this isn't just one game against the Brooklyn Nets Big Three, right? It was a standout performance for Colin Sexton. I labeled it his magnum opus in the story that I wrote after the game. For him to go shot for shot, toe to toe with that level of talent speaks volumes about the things that he's capable of. But Dave, here's the thing. This is now a 6-month stretch where Colin Sexton, going back to last December, where Colin Sexton has been one of the best players in the entire Eastern Conference. Not only is he scoring the ball at a high clip, but he's doing it efficiently. And now all of a sudden, with better teammates around him, in a better system, with better coaching, J.B. Bickerstaff taking over for John Beilein, suddenly the things that Colin Sexton had been doing are starting to contribute to wins. And that's the next step for a young player in his evolution. That shows that the stats that he was putting up last year, the year before, weren't quote unquote hollow stats. They were real. They needed him to score the ball. He did it at an efficient level, but the Cavs as an organization weren't good enough yet for that to translate to wins. Now I think the Cavs understand that even if Colin Sexton's style is a little bit uglier than some of these elite scorers in the NBA, even if he doesn't do it the traditional way, even if he is an undersized shooting guard, it can work. And we've seen it work here early on in this season.
The other thing is Garland's still banged up, but when those two played together early in the year, it was working. I mean, it was working at a pretty high level.
And not only that, Dave, it was working defensively. And we know last year it was not working defensively. They were the target of the opposing offense on a nightly basis. And the Cavs made a commitment this offseason, and you have to give the front office credit, Dave. They knew when they made the investment in Darius Garland and Colin Sexton, a non-traditional backcourt, an undersized backcourt, that the only way those guys were going to be able to cope on the defensive end was by putting quality defenders around them. And look what happens. You can get away now with playing Colin Sexton and Darius Garland together, and you can mask some of those defensive limitations because you have Andre Drummond anchoring the defense, because you have Larry Nance Jr. being disruptive, the league leader in steals, and because you have Isaac Okoro, a tough, hard-nosed, defensive-minded wing that can take the matchup against the premier guards in the NBA. The other night against Brooklyn, Colin Sexton didn't have to guard James Harden, right? Because Isaac Okoro was. And that's the way that you allow an undersized backcourt to flourish. They're not going to be great defensively. That's just not who they are. But you need the other components around them to make up for that. And the Cavs made a commitment to the defensive end by adding Okoro, by adding Andre Drummond, adding JaVale McGee, trading for Jared Allen and Taurean Prince. Now there are enough pieces around this backcourt that what they give you on offense is not going to be negated by what they give up defensively.
You know, the other thing is when we look at where the Cavs are after 14 games, 7-7, which is a huge upgrade from the two previous years, and we will show you graphically what it is. So last 2 years, their 7th win came at game number 28. This year it comes after game 14. The ironic part of that is the last year LeBron was here when they got swept by the Golden State Warriors, 2017-2018, they were 7-7 after 14 games. So I'm not saying they're going to the NBA Finals, but it is time, as we said earlier, that you start to say this is a legitimate, bottom of the playoff tier team as long as they keep playing like they have, which is very possible. They may even get better because they're all young.
And they may get better too, Dave, because they're getting important pieces back from the injury list. That's the thing to me that stands out the most about this 7-7 start for the Cavs. They have the second most games missed due to injury in the entire NBA. And we're not talking about just missing back end of the bench pieces, right? We're talking about missing Darius Garland, the only true point guard that the Cavs have on the roster that was healthy at one point in time. The Cavs have played more games, Dave, without a point guard this year than with one. Think about that. And Kevin Love has played one full game and 10 minutes, right? And Colin Sexton missed 5 games. And you have all these different injuries to all of these important players, and yet the Cavs have found a way to make it work. Yeah, they went into that lull for about a week and a half where the injuries were just too much, and it looked like they were going to start to fade. But here they are. They're still in the mix. They're still fighting. They're still showing the ability to overcome adversity. And you got to give a lot of credit, one, to general manager Kobe Altman for assembling the depth that he has to overcome some of these injuries that the Cavs have had early on in the season. And you absolutely have to give a ton of credit to JP Bickerstaff and the entire coaching staff for finding a way to just piece it together and keep this team afloat and make the necessary adjustments in the face of so much adversity. It's unbelievable to me, given everything that the Cavs have dealt with going back to the offseason, that they're here with a 500 record.
The other thing is this young core, it isn't like you got lucky with the lottery ball. In a lot of instances, you got very unlucky with it. You know, Garland was the 5th pick, Sexton the 8th pick. So you also have to credit, and Okoro looks like a player as well, what they needed. So they kind of had a blueprint and a thought process, and I know it's still early, but it looks like they got it right with some of those picks that were middle to bottom part of the lottery, which is not easy to do.
You're right about that, Dave. If you think about it, the quote-unquote Brooklyn pick that came in the blockbuster trade for Kyrie Irving was supposed to be one of the highest picks going into that year. It was one of the most valuable picks, and a lot of people around the NBA, Dave, felt like the Cavs couldn't get that pick from the Boston Celtics because Boston was clutching onto that because they expected it to be a top 3 pick. All of a sudden, Spencer Dinwiddie in Brooklyn goes on this great run towards the end of the season, and it falls to number 8. And that was supposed to be a 7-player draft. That's what everybody kept saying. There was a huge drop-off after Wendell Carter Jr., and yet the Cavs got Colin Sexton with the 8th pick. And he hasn't been Trae Young. He hasn't been Luka Doncic. But he has been very close to those guys in terms of what he's brought to this organization. He is now, with Kevin Porter Jr. out, he now has to be the cornerstone of this entire rebuild. And look, losing KPJ is a huge setback for this organization when it comes to the rebuild, Dave. There's no doubt about it. There were people inside this organization that thought he was the one. He was the most talented of all the young guys. He was the one that they stole at the end of the first round. He was the one that was going to change the trajectory. Well, he's no longer here. So now it's going to be up to Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, Dylan Windler, and some of these other guys. And as we have seen with Colin Sexton, if he can continue to make that rise and he can continue on this trajectory, then all of a sudden the loss of Kevin Porter Jr. isn't going to be felt as much.
Last thing I'll ask you before I let you go. So they beat the Nets with the first game together with Harden and Irving and Durant. Is there a sense you think can they do it again? Can they get them again in back-to-backs? I mean, you would think those 3 are not going to be in such a good mood, and they're going to be looking for the young off guard of the Cavs, Sexton, tonight.
Well, here's the good news, Dave. Kevin Durant is not going to play Friday night because they're going to give him maintenance for his Achilles. He played 50 minutes the other night for the Nets, and this is a guy who's coming off a significant Achilles injury. So they're going to rest him. They're playing on the first night of a back-to-back. Kyrie Irving played a ton of minutes after a 2-week hiatus, so who knows what's going to happen with him. But they go from a big 3 to a big 2. I don't know if the Cavs can get them again. Obviously, Brooklyn's going to be pissed, and Brooklyn's going to make some adjustments, kind of like what you do in a playoff series, and that's kind of the setup that we're in here. JB Bickerstaff said if Wednesday night was game 1, Friday night's going to be game 2. They're going to make some adjustments. We're going to make some adjustments. I don't know if the Cavs are going to win, but I can tell you this, based on everything that I've seen in the first 14 games, they're going to play hard. They're going to try their best. They're going to fight until the very end, and they're going to see if their ugly style, their words, not mine, is going to be enough to disrupt Brooklyn the way that it was in the first meeting between the two teams.
Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as the pages of the Plain Dealer. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Chris.
You got it, Dave. Anytime, man.
All right, Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter. We're step aside, take one more time out. We will wrap the weekend winners show up when we come back. Stay with us.
We're living in uncertain times, but you don't have to put your future on hold. At Tri-C, you can move ahead while staying safe and saving money. The majority of fall classes will take place online, but we've added a variety of formats to meet your learning needs, and we've taken many steps to keep you safe on campus. Whether you're ready to get started or your four-year plans have changed, check out Tri-C's programs and resources, because Tri-C is where futures begin.
Well, hello, everyone. Let me tell you a little bit about Brown's Football Insider. For only $3.99 a month, you can get text sent right to your phone each day from me, Dan Lobby, Scott Pasco, and Ellis Williams. In addition to that, you'll receive a Football Insider newsletter every day with special things from us, things that you won't see anywhere else on the site. You'll get breaking news, analysis, features, film breakdown, and things like that. Texting us directly gives you a great chance to cut through the clutter of Facebook, Twitter, other social media, and avoid the trolls. Also, it's the only way to get your questions on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. So why should you sign up? Try a 14-day free trial. You can cancel at any time. All it takes is one text, but you won't want to cancel. We have hundreds of subscribers join us over the last year. They love it and have stayed with us. We're seeing the Football Insider community grow every week, and it's only $3.99 a month, which is less than 14 cents a day. What I like most about Football Insider is the opportunity to connect with you one-on-one and really communicate with you. So how can you become a Football Insider? You can click on cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. Or easier yet, text me at 216-208-3965. Again, that's 216-208-3965.
It takes attention to detail. With your local Bryant dealer, you're getting more than just a technician. You're getting someone who pays attention to your needs and the little things that make a big difference. It takes a dealer you can rely on. And to keep your family warm this winter,
here, let me show you how this works.
It takes Bryant.
Bryant, whatever it takes.
And to keep your family comfortable, it takes Smiley One Heating and Cooling. Find them at smiley1.com.
More sports and less Levine. The weekend winners edition continues. I'm Dave Bacon. Before we go, we're going to take a look at some news from around the NFL, specifically Pittsburgh, as Dwayne Haskins, quarterback, who was with the Washington football team, was released by them. Did not end well by any means. He signed a futures contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the AFC North. Also, the Pittsburgh Steelers are talking to three-win Hugh Jackson about their offensive coordinator spot. So that'll be really interesting to follow. We'll see if Hugh can work his magic, same way he did here in Cleveland with the Pittsburgh offense. And some sad news from the world of sports as well. Home run king Hank Aaron passed away. Now, Aaron was a huge Browns fan, and back in the day used to sit in the old dog pound and watch games anonymously. You know, the home run king. Browns beat reporter Dan Lobby had a chance to talk to Aaron a few years ago about how big of a Browns fan he was, really, even the last few years.
I heard you tell the story once about sitting in a dog pound.
I did.
Old Municipal Stadium.
Many times.
Many times.
Yeah, I used to.
I used to get the plane and fly from Atlanta to Cleveland and watch a Sunday game and fly back.
What was that experience like?
Well, I loved it. I kind of got along with it very well. I didn't have no problem back then. Of course, I was not in the air and the guy who hit 700 home run. I was in the air, the guy on his way to hit 700 home run. So people didn't bother me too much until one day some guy saw me in the stand, and I said, well, it's time for me to go in a different direction. But I enjoyed myself. Those guys have a lot of fun in there. They talked to each other. Everybody knew each other, and the whole thing about it, I didn't know anybody up there, but I got along fine. I enjoyed myself. Ozzie Newsome.
Ozzie Newsome.
Yeah, he went to the University of Alabama.
Okay.
And I kind of followed his career when the ball club, when they drafted him, Cleveland drafted him. And then I followed him all through his playing career. He was probably one of the top tight ends in football. And then, of course, they missed out on going to the Super Bowl by one game when Brian Sipes, I think, threw that pass he shouldn't have thrown.
Yeah.
And then what's-his-name fumbled on the 2 or 3 yard line. So, I kind of followed him, and I kind of felt sorry for him and followed him when he was named the general manager of the Baltimore Ravens.
Well, do you still follow the Browns at all?
I do. I pray to Legion. When I see him playing, I wish him the best of luck.
Hank Aaron, the all-time home run king, the real home run king, not aided by anything, passed away today. A huge Browns fan, certainly. Sorry to hear about that. Hank Aaron, great guy. Some interesting news from around the NFL as far as coaching goes, head coaching jobs. A couple of guys with local ties. As Brandon Staley was named the head coach of the Chargers. He was a player and on the coaching staff at John Carroll University, of all places, and Nick Sirianni was named Eagles head coach. He was from Mount Union. Now, the Detroit Lions, franchise that has struggled mightily, they chose Dan Campbell as their new head coach. And as far as head coaches' press conferences go, the introductory ones, this one was really interesting.
This place has been kicked, it's been battered, it's been bruised, and I can sit up here and give you coach speak all day long. I can give you, hey, we're going to win this many games. I can't. None of that matters, and you guys don't want to hear it anyway. You've had enough of that shit, so excuse my language. All right? Here's what I do know, is that this team is going to take on the identity of this city, all right? And this city's been down, and it found a way to get up. All right, it's found a way to overcome adversity. All right, and so this team's going to be built on, we're going to kick you in the teeth. All right, and when you punch us back, we're going to smile at you. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off. All right, and we're going to stand up. And then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. All right, and on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap and we're going to get up. And then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down. And when we do, we're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing. All right, that's going to be the mentality.
Hey, Coach, that was great. The Zoom call froze up and nobody could hear that. So can you repeat that verbatim? It was great. And the ownership group wants to know, can you still suit up? Because I think you might have more passion than any of the 53 guys that you just inherited. Good luck to Dan Campbell. That certainly a very, very interesting introductory press conference for an NFL head coach. That'll do it for this edition of More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. Stay safe. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you Monday. Bud Shaw, the scheduled guest.